Good evening. Good to see each of you again this evening. I hope that we had a good afternoon. Air certainly is getting a little bit more chilly, that is for certain. And some like that chilly weather. I'm a summer person myself, but some people like the sweaters and coats and all those kind of things, whatever, I don't know. Move to Alaska. That might be overdoing it. Tonight we want to continue our series, if you will, and continue with some individuals, and we want to continue with the kings, beginning with God. There in the Old Testament, as we look at the kings, and I saw this particular photograph. It's really what it is, a photograph, this particular image. And what human beings fail to see is that even if you have a physical crown on your head, guess what you still are? You're still a pawn. You're still a pawn. Because you could be the most powerful individual on planet Earth. There still is someone more powerful than you. There is still someone to whom you are accountable and to whom you must answer. And that, of course, is the God of heaven. Interestingly, there have been some kings that understood that and ruled very well and did those things that were right and good. And then there were some who abused their power. They thought that they had more than they actually had. And so they took advantage of that, and they were evil. They were ones that the Lord was not pleased with, and they did those things that were evil in His sight. There is, even within us, as also this particular image then gives to us, there is even some royalty in all of us too, especially as it relates to those who are in the Lord's church. And so it is always my privilege to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ every Lord's Day to the saints, to the rulers, to the ruling class, if you will, in the spiritual realm of the kingdom of God. And I do not take that very lightly at all. I know to whom I speak, and it is to the greatest people on planet Earth. What a great privilege it is to proclaim the gospel, the riches of His grace, every Lord's Day to the finest people on planet Earth. And so within us, in the spiritual realm, each of us is a king and a queen. And guess what? When we get to heaven, will a crown not be awaiting us? Oh, it's waiting for us. The Apostle Paul was ready for it. He has it now. And when we die in the Lord, a crown is going to be ours. Let's begin then with the kings. And note then, let me turn that on. There we go. That's better. That Israel began as a theocracy. That is, God ruled. God ruled. Now, when did this theocracy begin? Well, it might interest you to know that God began to rule the nation of Israel before Israel was a nation. Note what God tells Abram here in Genesis 17 and verse 8. And I will give unto thee and to thy seed after thee the land wherein thou art a stranger, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. Now, He's going to then rule this nation. When was He going to rule this nation? From the very beginning. He told Abraham while he was in yet Ur of the Chaldees that they're going to be my people, and I'm going to be their God. I'm going to be the one then that rules over them. And so God wanted to be their king. But guess what? they were not satisfied with God being their God. They were not satisfied with God being their king. And so when a powerful individual came along, they decided, oh, well, here's someone that can rule over us and be our king. And there was one, Jerubbaal. You remember Jerubbaal, do you not? Sure you do. You know who Jerubbaal is. We call him Gideon. Gideon's other name was Jerubbaal because, of course, he broke down, tore down his father's grove to Baal. And so he was called Jerubbaal after that time. So it was not just when we'll get there in a second, it was not just to Samuel, but yet it was to Gideon. Back in Judges chapter 8, verse 23. I guess I need to get to the book of Judges, do I not? There we go. Okay. Judges 8, verse 23. Note that when the people, they came to Gideon because with just 300 men, recall that Gideon delivered the people not only against the mass, but he even went against the kings that fled as well. Zebah and Zalmunna, he went after them after they fled the battle and got them as well. And let's see, verse 22. Then the men of Israel said unto Gideon, rule thou over us, both thou and thy son. In other words, set up a dynasty. See, that's how it is. The king rules, and then his son rules, and then his grandson rules. You rule over us, you and your son's son also, for thou hast delivered us from the hand of Midian. And Gideon said unto them, thankfully, I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. Because you see, God was already ruling. He was already their God. He was already their king. Gideon was just their governor. He was just the one that helped them in this particular situation to deliver them out of the hand of the Midianites. So it's not a surprise when we go to 1 Samuel, there chapter 8, when the people are talking to Samuel, give us a king. Because they had already asked for a king a couple of hundred years prior. So this has been on their minds for a long time, for generations. Now let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 8. And note that when the time was right yet again, that the people asked for a king. And the Lord said to Samuel, you listen, you hearken to the voice of the people in all that they say unto thee, for they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. Of course, they wanted a physical king, someone that they could go to and, I guess, bow down to and pay their taxes to and give their children and their lands and their goods to that person instead of the God of heaven. And that's, by the way, that's exactly what Samuel told them was going to happen. He said, this is what's going to happen. Give us a king anyway. 3 kings later, well, 4 kings. The nation is totally split over what reason? He took too many children, too many lands, too much money. See, you warn people, no, we want this anyway. The people rejected God from being their ruler. They rejected all of his governors. For what reason? To be like all of the other nations. In 1 Samuel 8, verse 5, and they said unto him, behold, thou art old. Speaking to Samuel, of course. And your sons, they do not walk in your ways. Now, that was a true statement, by the way. Now make us a king to judge us. For what reason? To be like everyone else. To be like all the nations. Go down to verse 20. That we also may be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us, and go out before us, and fight our battles. I guess they were unsatisfied, they were dissatisfied with every single time that there was a situation that God would go out and fight their battles for them. I guess they were dissatisfied when they went to battle that not one man of God's people, if they were doing what was right and good, that not one man lost his life. I guess they were dissatisfied with that. I guess they were dissatisfied with meeting God's demands of taking, Jericho. I want you to walk around the city once for 6 days, and then on the seventh day, I want you to walk around it 7 times. Yell, priests blow the trumpets, city is going to be taken. I guess that was too much. That was too much. No, we want a king so that we can storm the city and lose half our men, which is what would have happened, by the way. No, God, we don't want you to rule over us. We don't want you to fight our battles. We want a human being so he can go out before us, so he can fight our battles, and that he can judge us. It doesn't matter that he is human and he's going to make mistakes. And he's going to count the people at the very end of his reign, causing tens of thousands of people to die. No, that's all right. That's all right. And that's the good one. That's the good one. We don't want you, God. And God said, you give it to them anyway. Isn't that something? You and I would not do like God did. We would be like when God talked to Moses and said, Moses, you stand right over here. I'm going to kill all these people, and from these rocks, I'm going to bring up children unto Abraham. That's where you and I would have been, of course, a long, long time before. Let's get into the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom. So in the United Kingdom, how many kings do we have? That's right. We have 3 kings. The first king, when Samuel went to anoint this particular king, the lot fell to Benjamin, which of course is the least of all of the tribes of Israel. Then the lot fell to the smallest family in the tribe of Benjamin. And then the lot fell to the youngest son of the smallest family. And that individual happened to be this man named Saul. Oh, they were so proud of Saul. Do you know why they were proud of Saul? Because he was head and shoulders above everyone else. He physically looked like a king. Physically, he looked like a king. He was not a king. You know where they found him when they said, Samuel said, I'm going to anoint you king? He was hiding. He was hiding. Let's go to 1 Samuel chapter 10, verses 22, 23, and 24. Therefore they inquired of the Lord further, if the man should yet come hither. Is that where I am? Yes, okay. Behold, he hath hid himself among the stuff. He hath hid himself among the stuff. Verse 23. And they ran and fetched him there, and when he stood among the people, he was higher than any of the people from his shoulders and upward. And Samuel said to all the people, see ye him whom the Lord hath chosen, that there is none like him among all the people. And all the people shouted and said, God save the king. They were just waiting to say that. God save the king. We now have a king. We're just like everybody else. He meets what our perceptions are of a king. And so they were pleased with him. And Saul did pretty well for a year or so. But then that's all it took, because he was not of kingly material. And therefore it did not take him very long to leave God's way. And so at the very end of Samuel's life, now Samuel never saw David on the throne. He anointed him king, but Samuel died before he ever saw David on the throne. Not only did he not see him on the throne of Judah, but of course it was another 7.5 years before he assumed to be the king over all of Israel. So there was kind of a mini situation when David first ascended to the throne, a little bit of a divided kingdom for about 7.5 years. 1 Samuel 16, verse 13, then, is when Samuel anoints David. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. And Samuel rose up, and he went to his home there in Ramah. And then Samuel never left Ramah after that until the day that he died. David then was a good king. He made some mistakes. He made some pretty big mistakes. But his heart was always to do that which was right and follow after the Lord. And then in 1 Kings chapter 1, late in David's life, he committed adultery. He had the woman's husband murdered. And even after all of that, they had a son, and Bathsheba named him Solomon. And David made a promise to Bathsheba because, by the way, she had aspirations for her son. She had designs for her son. Since Solomon wound up being the king, you know, that just gets you to think, was she there on the rooftop there accidentally? You have to think, you have to wonder. I do not know the answer to that question. And I'm not saying that she was. But you do have to wonder. Because her son, all of David's children, he had a number of sons that were already alive. And yet it was Bathsheba's son, Solomon, that wound up on the throne. And very interesting. So then we go to 1 Kings chapter 1, verses 34 and 39. After David passed away, then Solomon, his young son, not a child, but young nonetheless, then he was going to ascend to the throne. In verse 34, let me turn the page here. There we are. Then Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, anoint him their king over Israel. Blow ye the trumpet and say, God save King Solomon. Skip down to verse 39. Zadok the priest took a horn of oil out of the tabernacle and anointed Solomon. And they blew the trumpet, and all the people said, God save King Solomon. Now, look at that word there. It should stick out to you. Tabernacle. Does the word tabernacle there in verse 39 stick out to you? It should. Why is that? Because up until Solomon's reign from Moses, Mount Sinai, while the people were when the people first got out of Egypt, came out of Egypt, they built the tabernacle. And so from Mount Sinai all the way to the first few years of Solomon's reign, that's over 500 years, folks, there is a tent of worship that the people then came to, and that's the tabernacle. Solomon built the temple. And it was such a great building. It was one of the 7 ancient wonders of the world, that particular temple. Not only was it a great building in and of itself, but there was no sawing, no hammering, no metal on metal in the construction of that great building. Isn't that something? Because his father David did all of the prep work, and all Solomon had to do was put it together like Lincoln logs. Some of you get that. Some of you get that. Divided kingdom. Divided kingdom. Rehoboam and Jeroboam. Again, 4 kings later, we have a divided kingdom because Rehoboam took the advice of the young men, and he said, oh, my little finger is going to be thicker than my father's thigh. He was going to really cause the people to work. And what did Solomon do? You know what Solomon did? Every month was a tribe, because there are 12 tribes in Israel there, 12 months in the year. Every month, a tribe had to attend to all of Solomon's needs. and the palace. Everything. Everything that came in, they had to do all the cooking, all the cleaning, all of that stuff. Once a month. Do you think that took a toll on those tribes? Was that at great cost to them? It certainly was. And then Rehoboam, his son, comes in and says, oh, that you haven't seen anything yet. I'm going to make it so much worse. You're going to have perhaps 2 months instead of just 1 month. No, they weren't having anything like that. And so the prophet Ahijah comes to Jeroboam and says, comes up to him and takes a brand new coat, a mantle, and rips it into 12 pieces and gives 10 to Jeroboam. And he said, 10 tribes are going to be yours. And that's exactly what eventually happened, was that 10 tribes were given to Jeroboam. And Rehoboam then, only Judah and Jerusalem, Judah and Benjamin, stayed with Rehoboam. All the other 10 tribes went, Judah and Benjamin stayed with Rehoboam. Did I get that right? And the other 10 tribes went with Jeroboam. And so we have now a divided kingdom. 1 Kings 12, verse 20 is the passage on that divided kingdom. And it came to pass, when all Israel heard that Jeroboam was come again, that they sent and called him unto the congregation and made him king over all Israel. There was none that followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. And Benjamin was in there, but Judah and Benjamin then followed after Rehoboam, and all the other tribes followed after Jeroboam. In the divided kingdom, there was not one king in Israel that was a good king. From Jeroboam all the way until Assyrian captivity, every king did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. Why? Well, for one thing, Jeroboam didn't set them out on a good footing, because in Dan in the north and Bethel in the south, he put up gods, false gods, for the people to go and worship in those particular areas, so that they didn't have to go to Jerusalem, because he thought that if the people went to Jerusalem, oh, then their hearts would be back to Judah, and then it would be a united kingdom. In other words, the kingdom would leave Jeroboam and his family. Well, it was a very short dynasty anyway, because they did those things that were not lawful to do. And his thought process, Jeroboam's thought process, was not what it should be. He should have, God gave him the country. Why would God take it away? But that was not what he was thinking. He was thinking, oh, people are going to Jerusalem to worship God. They're going to go back to Judah. And so he set up then false gods for the people to worship. Further than that, he did away with the Levitical priesthood. Now anybody can be a priest. Anyone. Well, when you break God's law concerning gods, false gods, you break God's law concerning the tribe from whom the priest can come, guess what you can do? Anything you want to. The sky is the limit. And that's exactly what happened. They were so evil that God then caused them to go into captivity. But there were a few times when the king of Judah and the king of Samaria or Ephraim, Israel, when they would get together and they would do some things together. Such was the case with Jehoshaphat and that wonderful man, King Ahab, with his wonderful wife, Jezebel. Oh, they were salt of the earth folks, don't you know? No, they were the most evil people that has ever graced the planet. And so in 1 Kings chapter 22, verses 1 through 8. 1 Kings 22, 1 through 8. Talking about Jehoshaphat, and that's 2 Kings, isn't it? See, you get that. No, I guess that was right, wasn't it? Sometimes you second guess yourself. Oh, this is the wrong chapter. There we go. Dyslexia, I tell you what. There it is. Okay, 1 Kings 22. And they continued 3 years without war between Syria and Israel. And it came to pass in the 3rd year that Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. And the king of Israel, that's Ahab, by the way, said to his servants, Know ye that Ramoth in Gilead is ours, and we be still, and take it not out of the hand of king of Syria? And he said to Jehoshaphat, Wilt thou go with me to battle to Ramoth Gilead? And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, I am as thou art, my people as thy people, my horses as thy horses. See, we're in league here, verse 5. And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, Inquire, I pray thee, at the word of the Lord today. You see, people in Judah, they have this idea that I need to understand that God is with me. And his brother up here in Israel, he should know the same. Notice what is said, verse 6. Then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400, and said to them, Shall I go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall I forbear? And all these men, they said, Oh, go up. The Lord's going to deliver that into the hand of the king. Jehoshaphat said, Is there not here a prophet of the Lord besides, a real prophet of God, that we might inquire of him? That's what he's really asking. Verse 8, here it is. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, There is yet one man, Micaiah, the son of Imlah, by whom we may inquire of the Lord, but I hate him. Why do you hate him, Ahab? For he doth not prophesy good concerning me, but evil. And Jehoshaphat said, Let not the king say so. Well, why do you hate the man? Because he tells it like it is. He tells the truth. Because Ahab, you're not a good person. You're evil. You do not follow after God. That's why Micaiah then has to say all of these things. If you obey God, then he'll say good things. But when you do not, he can only say that which is evil. And then we come to the end of these two kingdoms. It was inevitable because, number one, it was prophesied that the children of Israel would go into captivity because they would not do as the God of heaven asked for them to do. And so we come to 2 Kings 17, verses 5 and 6, that the nation of Israel in the north, that they go into Assyrian captivity. And the king of Assyria came up throughout all the land and went up to Samaria, that's the capital city now of Israel, and besieged it for 3 years. And in the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away into Assyria and placed them in Halah and in Habor by the river Gozan and in the cities of the Medes. Folks, that's a long way away. We call that transmigration, by the way, where you take a large group of people from a particular area and then you pick them up, figuratively speaking, and you plant them somewhere else on planet Earth. That's transmigration. People do that. Certain countries do that even today. You have densely populated places in the world, and they have other places that are less densely populated, so they'll take some of the population and plant them other places. They're trying to do that to help. But not the Assyrians. That's not why they did that. They did that to hurt. As a matter of fact, that's where we get the Samaritans today. They were that mixed breed, if you will, of people, Jews and Gentiles together. Then we come to 1 Chronicles 6:15. 1 Chronicles 6:15. Judah, you're not out of it either, not by a long shot. And Jehozadak went into captivity when the Lord carried away Judah and Jerusalem by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar being the king of Babylon. And so Judah went into Babylonian captivity. Israel never returned. when they went into Assyrian captivity, they never returned. They never recovered. But Judah would go into Babylonian captivity and spend about 70 years there, and then they would return, but only a few. A remnant would come back. Why this terrible part of history, especially for the children of Israel, as they would become known as the Jews? Because they did not obey the Lord their God, and because they did not allow Him to be their king. The history of the children of Israel has been, I want it my way right now, and if I don't get my way, I want to go back to Egypt. That's been their history. And God said, if you continue on like that, then I'm going to destroy you. And that's exactly what He did. He had a promise to keep, though. And the promise was to Abraham, and the promise was to David, that through their seed, all nations of the earth were going to be blessed. And He did that through Jesus the Christ, who is of the seed of David, who is of the seed of Abraham. And because of that seed, we have redemption of sins today. Is Jesus your king? The Jews, they rejected Him. They didn't want Him as their king. But He can be your king this very hour. If you believe in Him, if you repent of your sins, confessing that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, be baptized for the remission of your sins. Perhaps you have done that, and yet you have enthroned self and dethroned Jesus. Reverse that, I suggest, immediately, as together we stand and we sing. Almost persuaded.